Right, welcome to the continued discussion. For the purpose of continuity, we will bill it GPR20. So, what I had said was that all knowledge is mythical. We had sort of concluded that all knowledge is mythical. Our knowledge is based on useful stories, that is based on convenient assumptions which carry no guarantee of being true. We have seen so many things, so many belief systems, so many myths on which people have laid down their lives, for which people have laid down their lives, right? So they are truth to those people. Objectively, they may not be true. They are not true. Yeah. Some things like science, many of the discoveries of science, they are objectively true. But then objectivity itself assumes, like I said, the truthfulness of sense data and of mental logical computation. So that is also dependent on some assumptions, and even for these assumptions I have no proof. No one has any proof. So none of this is based on any absolute truth or any real reality, because no absoluteness can be available to evolution born. All this happened because of evolution, mind mediated. Everything that we understand is through our mind. Mind created what? Image built. So there is our mind creates some image of reality, and through that image our sensed reality is built, what we live by. We need that in order to survive and thrive and reproduce and continue the march of the genes. We die, of course. We sort of seem to be slaves to the selfish gene, as Richard Dawkins said. So on what basis do I claim that objective truth is not equal to absolute truth? Because we have evidence for that. We have talked about that evidence many times, but let's do it once more. Let's take, for example, the colors red and green. Those are real, distinct, different colors for us. They are not so for many different species, right? And that's so because we know today that they are a part of the visible spectrum, which is a part of the much longer, much greater electromagnetic radiation spectrum. Let's see how the same thing can be experienced differently. I don't know if you remember, but some time back there was a picture of a dress which seemed blue-black to some people and ivory gold to some other people. The same picture. Some people saw it as blue-black and some people saw it as ivory and gold. Go ahead, search on the internet for that, and just search for dress, blue, black, white, gold, or ivory gold, something like that. You will get it. So how could that be? If this were absolute truth, it should be absolutely the same. Then take example of what we talked about, red and green. See, colors don't see these colors. Dogs don't see these colors, red and green. Their world is monochromatic. Red and green find no place there. So dogs are bichromatic. They have two kinds of color cones. Humans are trichromatic, right? And each of the cones sees in 100 at 100 different levels. So while dogs and horses see 100 into 100, 10,000 colors. We see 100 into 100 into 100. That's a million colors. And when I say we, I mean typically the men. Women sometimes actually see more colors because the code for the cones sits in on the X chromosome, and men have only one X chromosome. So we have a hard stop at 100 into 100 into 100. Women sometimes have one tuning, one standard tuning on one of the X chromosome and one slightly different tuning on the other X chromosome. So though it's not truly 100 into 100 into 100 into 100 like 100 million, but it is definitely more than a million which men can see. And you'll actually notice that women understand colors a lot more than we men do. And there is, as we have talked about, there is sufficient data to prove that as an objective truth, which is based on the belief that senses tell us the right thing. So if that is the right thing they're telling us, why are dogs' senses telling him something else? Human senses are telling something else. Eagles have got 4 different types of cones. They can see ultraviolet as well, and that then becomes they can see 100 into 100 into 100 into 100, truly 100 million colors. Pigeons, it is believed, are pentachromatic, so they've got another factor of into 100. Believe it or not, mantis shrimps, some really beautiful creatures in the sea on the coral reefs, I assume, some types have got 12 types of cones, the color cones in their eyes. Some others have 16 types. So imagine the color spectrum which they are able to see. I mean, that would be some world, right? So senses, it's just an assumption that they tell the truth. They tell some kind of an objective truth, which is probably close to the absolute truth, which is what is needed for our existence, our survival and thrival on this planet Earth. If our sun had a different mix of radiation, we probably wouldn't be seeing these colors. We would be seeing a different set of colors. If and when our sun becomes a red dwarf, let's say, and if we are still there, which we will not be, or whichever things can actually take that kind of heat for a short while, or they are able to see whatever, you know what I mean, their color spectrum will shift. So this is only about one sense that we have talked about. And then when you get into the mind, all the other senses and the mind and complex mind like ours, human mind, mental images are way more complicated. So how do we assume that that's all truth? It's not. That's the reason why psychedelics see, when people are under the effect of some drugs, they see very different colors and very different images. Some people, because of certain imbalance in the chemicals in their brains, they see other different things. So bottom line is, if we did not understand differently and see things differently, why do we disagree with other people? You see, if everyone saw the same thing, we should all agree on the same thing, right? There can't be any disagreements. And if you believe that in every disagreement you are the person who's right and the other person is wrong, you have to ask the question, why that person is wrong, and you can't seriously believe that in all disagreements you or the stand you approve of is always right. Religious people, please note that. Very often religious people believe seriously, and how can they seriously believe that in all disagreements your stand is the one which is right and the others are always wrong? How can you believe that? How can you believe that? If you're always right, why are you not God? Simple question. If you're always right, why are you not God? Because if you're always right, you will always be able to predict future better, and you'll always be able to get better benefits, and you will gradually become so much more powerful than the people who are always wrong. Because the people who are always wrong will always be sitting on railway tracks and dying. They will be forever not eating proper food. They will be forever drinking poisonous substances. They will forever be jumping down the cliffs. So, you cannot always be right, because if you were, you would be God. So, remember that. Scientific people typically do understand that. Religious people typically don't understand that. So, religious people typically, for example, many religious Hindus today thinks that Muslims do everything wrong. Many Muslims actually stand up, all the Muslims stand up during the prayer and say La ilaha illallah. So, they believe that they are absolutely right, and other people, Hindus or Christians or Jews or Buddhists or whatever, or atheists are always wrong all the time. Think about that. If you guys were always right, why are you not gods? Why are other people still alive? And more importantly, why are they generally doing better than you? Why are you having to depend upon them to invent all the things for you, to discover all the things for you? Religious people, you ought to think about that, please. So, this is not a religion beating session. This is to say that everyone believes in myths, not just old religions, not just children, not just religious people, but even non-religious people. Political ideologies, say for example communism, it's a belief system. Free marketism, it's a belief system. Even science is a belief system, as we just discussed. So, all knowledge available to us is non-absolute. That is, it is relative. This point bears repeating. All knowledge available to us is non-absolute. That is, it is relative. So, a statement is always more, less, or equal in objective truth value to another. However, we have no clue about its absolute truth value, since we have no clue about what absolute truth is. We just assume that the more objectively true a statement is, the closer it should be to whatever the absolute truth is. We, as in scientific, logical, rational people, on the other hand, religious people sort of believe that their subjective truth is equal to absolute truth. They believe that. And they don't see, because that's the problem with us humans. We live on stories, we live on myths. We normally don't accept evidence even when it is staring in our face. That's a problem with all of us humans. Because if religious truth was equal to absolute truth, why would uh, all the things be invented by scientists and not by religious priests? Why isn't why wasn't Apollo aircraft developed by why wasn't calculus developed by a priest? So think about that. Scientists are also human beings. They also live in a society. So most scientists tend to be socially religious. Okay? Just like some people are social drinkers, that they drink only when socially they have to. Some people are socially religious, that just because they have to. Darwin, for example, was socially religious. I'm also, for example, socially religious. But the belief systems, whether they be religious, non-religious, scientific, we have seen that they are all myths. So we just assume that a more objectively true a statement is, the closer it should be to whatever the absolute truth is. Whether absolute knowledge of any absolute reality or absolute truth in any mind mediated, in any non-mind mediated way is knowable or not, is itself unknowable. Let me say this again. Whether absolute knowledge of any absolute reality or absolute truth in any non-mind mediated way is knowable or not, is itself unknowable. I'm not going to spend more time on this. Those who want, we can have discussion separately offline. And further, unknown unknowns are almost a certainty. How can we assume otherwise? Therefore, as all our knowledge is based on our myths and is by necessity, thus, as all our knowledge is based on our myths and is by necessity incomplete, biased, belief-based, and unfounded in any absolute foundation and thus relative, how can we ever lay claim to be the owners of the truth? We can never own the truth, though we can always strive to arrive as close as possible to the better, more objective, and hopefully the absolute truth. To do that, we need to first doubt our own claims to truth and listen to as many variant understandings of truth as we humanly can. In other words, we have to trust our fellow blind elephant experiencers. If I'm the one who says elephant is like a fan, I should listen to those who say no, it's like a wall, who say no, it's like a rope, who say no, it's like a spear, who say no, it's like a tree, who say no, it's like a snake. So we have to do that and add any possible truths that they experience to our experienced and claimed truth. We must always say, शायद तुम भी मेरी तरह कुछ कुछ सही हो. शायद तुम भी मेरी तरह कुछ कुछ सही हो. Perhaps you are also partially correct like me. Perhaps you are also partially correct like me. In the language of Jain philosophy, we should all be Syadavadis and Anekantavadis. And just as an aside, like them first, vow to do no harm. But we must understand that the other person is not wrong, but in the same ballpark of rightness as we are. In the same ballpark. You see, someone might be a little more right or a little more wrong than me, but we are all very close to each other. We are in the same ballpark. We all seem very far from each other, but look at it from the perspective of the coronavirus. It can as easily infect a rich man as a poor man, a scientist as a religious person, a priest as well as a black man as a white man, whatever. All kinds of things, all kinds of beliefs are meaningless, for that. All, it can happen to a person with an IQ of 50 and a person a person with an IQ of 150. So then we are all in the same ballpark. So the other person is not wrong, but in the same ballpark of rightness as we are. And we must work together, and through improving each our relative truths, help us both move the very ballpark closer to the possible absolute truth. I'll say it again. And we must work together, and through improving each our relative truths, help us both move the very ballpark closer to the possible absolute truth. Let this be the last day we say, you or he or she or they are wrong. Let us say instead, let us both learn to be truer and better. Let us both learn to be truer and better. Because only then can we together beat the coronavirus, and only then can we make the world a happy place after the threat is gone. Remember that. We are all in it together. And our knowledge is all relative. I might be a little truer than you, or a little less true than you. Doesn't matter. Same ballpark. Let's come together. Let's learn from each other. Let's keep learning from each other. That's what we have been trying for a long time. On our group, School of Useful Life, come join that. Be happy.